I have always wanted to visit Hokkaido. I have been once for work, but that was only for about 24 hours, so I didn't really get to explore very much. Recently though, I had the opportunity to travel to Hokkaido for 4 days on a tour assignment. Now, normally I'm busy taking photos on these trips, but this time I was going primarily as a writer, so I had a bit more time than usual to chronicle the journey, and I thought it would be fun to share it with you all. So I hope you'll enjoy coming along with me for 4 days in Hokkaido. The tour was focused around the eastern regions of Hokkaido, specifically Abashiri, Nemuro, and Kushiro. This area has all kinds of scenery and wildlife, and we got to see it all while cycling, kayaking, and hiking. Now, to be totally honest, I'm normally someone who likes to travel on his own, but I do love the outdoors, so if there was going to be a tour that I would enjoy, this seemed like it was going to be it. We arrived in Hokkaido on Monday, September 30th, but the tour actually began on Tuesday, October 1st. It was nice to get there a bit early and have a good night's rest, and also an opportunity to wander around a little bit before the tour started. We stayed the night in Abashiri City, which is a quiet coastal town, and while the weather was a bit warmer than I had hoped for during this tour, it was much cooler than Tokyo and really beautiful until the very last day. On the first day of the tour, we met up with the good folks of Connect Trip, who were responsible for handling everything. Our main guides were Toro and Aya, who were super kind and engaging throughout the entire trip. Their English was also quite good. Although I do speak Japanese, it's certainly far from perfect, and so it's nicer when you don't have to worry about using it. The tour started out with cycling down from the Bihoro Pass to Lake Kusharo. Now, I love road cycling, and so I was honestly a little bit disappointed that we couldn't fly down the mountain at breakneck speeds, but with a large group not accustomed to that kind of thing, obviously that wouldn't make sense. And on the plus side, it was nice to take in some of the views on the way down at a much slower pace. Once we reached Lake Kusharo, we switched gears, no pun intended, and did some kayaking. So I'm not a huge water sports person, but the lake was beautiful and we had a really neat opportunity to reach a volcanic spot that is only accessible by kayak. Lake Kusharo is actually a huge caldera and the entire area is still volcanically active. So even along this pristine lake, there are various spots like this where water and gases literally boil up from beneath the surface of the earth. Getting to see this in person was a super cool experience. After kayaking, we had a delicious lunch on the lake before hopping back on our bikes for some more cycling. This cycling was all pretty flat and easy, especially because the bikes we used were battery assisted, so it really required almost no effort. We got to make a few interesting stops along this ride though, including a beach where, due to the widespread geothermic activity on the lake, you can dig a hot spring for your feet right in the sand. We also stopped by the Kawayu Visitor Center, where we heard a short lesson about the geographic history of the region, and then we arrived at our final stop, Mount Io, which we would actually be hiking the next day. I really enjoyed this section of our trip. The scenery and experiences were amazing from start to finish. We ended our day at our hotel for the next 2 nights, the Kusharo Prince Hotel. I've done jobs with Prince hotels around Japan over the years, and I can say these are some of the best hotels in the country. The rooms are nice and the food is delicious. This particular hotel also has a hot spring bath, which I personally love. It's such a great way to unwind after a long day on your feet. For obvious reasons, I can't show you any video from that, but I highly recommend trying out the experience if you're in Japan. It can be a little bit awkward at first, but it's definitely worth it. I was also able to catch some amazing star photography over the lake before dinner. On a clear night, this place has some spectacular views of the stars. Although the first day of the tour was incredible, I think day 2 was probably my favorite day on the trip. I started out very early in the morning, hoping to catch a sunrise on the lake with my camera. Since the hotel is right on the lake, this is much easier than many sunrise outings where I have to drive an hour or more to get to the spot. But sunrise was shortly after 5 a.m., so I still had to get up pretty early. Unfortunately, the lighting and color didn't really work out that well that morning, but the lake was still beautiful. After a delicious buffet-style breakfast at the hotel, we headed out to the main visit for the day, Mount Iyo. Mount Iyo, also known as Atosa Nupuri, is an active volcano in eastern Hokkaido. It's obvious that this mountain is volcanic the moment you see it, since there are volcanic vents scattered around the mountain releasing endless clouds of sulfuric vapor. Following the unfortunate tragedy on Mount Ontake in 2014, which claimed the lives of some 60 hikers, spots like this around the country became much stricter about access. You are only allowed to hike Mount Iyo with a professional guide, and there is a warning system in place which, if it reaches level 2, which is only the second level, immediately halts access to the mountain. Thankfully, we had no problems on our trip and were able to explore the mountain with our guides comfortably. The hike begins in the woods, but quickly transitions to volcanic terrain. Seeing the volcanic vents almost everywhere you look on the mountain was a surreal experience. Parts of the hike honestly looked like a different planet. It was almost like hiking on Mars or Venus or something. Our guides Yukiko and Hagi did a great job both keeping us safe and explaining the history and geography of the mountain as we trekked along. The hike was quite easy, and although you don't reach the actual summit for safety reasons, it still had some amazing views along the way, both of the volcanic activity and the surrounding area. I can only imagine how beautiful peak fall foliage season is from here. The rest of the afternoon was free time for the group. We had a nice cookout on the hotel grounds for lunch, and then we had free time to explore or just hang out at the hotel. I took a few pictures around the lake again in the evening, and then enjoyed the hot spring again before bed. Day 3 started off early once again for me, hoping to catch a nice sunrise. The sunrise was definitely better this time. I'm not sure if it was worth getting up before 5 a.m. better, but better. Day 3 also brought more cycling and some light hiking, this time along the Notsuke Peninsula. The nature here reminded me of Maine at parts, with lots of wildlife and tidally connected ecosystems. One of my favorite experiences was a red fox that greeted us for a bit along the trail. I don't think I've ever seen a wild fox before, so that was a special treat for me. Although the weather could have been better, this area still had some beautiful views, and I really enjoyed getting to explore with the group. After cycling and hiking, we took a private boat ride out into the waters to look for seals. We saw quite a few in the water, and I really wished I had brought my longer lens with me. I left it at home just because it's so heavy and I wasn't sure how much I'd get to use it, but I definitely wished I had had it here. Anyway, it was still fun to see all the seals hanging out. Like the fox, I don't think I've ever seen wild seals before, so this was another treat. Upon reaching the port, we headed back to Shibetsu to visit a salmon aquarium. This area is famous for its salmon, and we even had the opportunity to see a place where the salmon breed. As someone who loves salmon, or maybe I should say as someone who loves eating salmon, sushi, cooked, however, it was fun to learn more about their natural ecosystem. And the delicious salmon lunch we had at the restaurant made it even better. After a relaxed time at the aquarium, we headed to Kushiro City, where we stayed at the Kushiro Prince Hotel. The highlight of this evening, however, was a visit to a restaurant known as Bankoya in downtown Kushiro. Bankoya specializes in local food, especially seafood, but what made it so enjoyable was the genuine Japanese dining experience. The moment you enter the restaurant, you can tell that this place is local and that it is popular. It's good that we had a reservation because several customers came in after us looking to eat and were turned away because the restaurant literally had no seating available and wouldn't anytime soon. And I could see why. The food was delicious and the atmosphere was killer. I highly recommend a visit if you're in Kushiro. That is, assuming that you can get a seat. Of course, all good things must come to an end, and so day 4 saw the end of our trip, but not without a few more adventures first. I got up early on this final day and walked around Kushiro City a bit by myself, specifically around the nearby port area. Unfortunately, there was a consistent drizzling rain, but it wasn't too bad, and I still enjoyed seeing some of the local sights. I followed this by another buffet-style breakfast at the hotel before we headed out with the group for the day. Our main visit for this final day was the Kushiro marshlands. This is an enormous protected marshland just outside of Kushiro City. Seeing this area, however, you would have no idea that it was that close to a big town. In fact, I've seen a lot of Japan, and I've never seen a place that looked like this. The marshland is expansive and flat. It almost looks like something you might see in Africa. I mean, I've never been to Africa, but that's what I imagine, at least from the pictures that I've seen. After a brief explanation by a local expert about the history and wildlife of the area, we had the opportunity to kayak down the river right through the middle of the marshland. I had a great time on this leg of the trip. It's super easy and requires very little effort because of course the river is flowing, so you just float along with the river. The main thing is keeping yourself from going into the riverbanks, but other than that, there's little to think about other than just enjoying the sights. We saw a ton of deer in this area, which all curiously looked at us as we floated past, along with a number of birds local to the ecosystem. After we arrived at the endpoint, we headed to our final meal for this tour, which was held at a little restaurant out in the country called Heart and Tree. The owner, Sachiko Hattori, always enjoyed the little house on the prairie growing up, and she built the restaurant with that in mind. The views from the restaurant are amazing, and the place itself is beautifully rustic. When I stepped inside, it reminded me a lot of many places I've visited in New Hampshire in the United States, which, to be clear, is very high praise coming from me. The food was delicious, and Sachiko and her husband Masato were warm-hearted and welcoming. I only wish the weather had worked out better, but then again, it was nice to end a chilly, damp autumn day with a warm atmosphere and fresh food. Honestly, it was the perfect end for an amazing trip. I had an absolute blast on this tour. It was fun getting to know our guides and the other people on the tour with me. We had a great group and a lot of fun together. Even though this was for a job, honestly to me it didn't feel like it. It felt like I was just having a good time with friends. The entire trip was simply incredible. The only thing I regretted is that my family couldn't be there with me to enjoy it. That, and the fact that I know there's so much more to explore in this area. As much as we saw, this tour only scratched the surface. As we headed back to Tokyo, I knew I would want to come back with my family and explore even more of this incredible region of Japan. Thank you everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope maybe someday you'll get the chance to explore this area of Japan for yourself. I'll see you next time, but until then, stay safe and happy shooting.